Welcome to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. I'm your host, Kendra Rinaldi. This is a space to explore the full spectrum of grief, from the kind that comes with death to the kind that shows up in life's many transitions. Through stories and conversations, we remind each other that we're not alone. Your journey matters, and here we're figuring it out together. Let's dive right in to today's episode. Let's start with a quick disclaimer. This podcast includes personal stories and perspectives on topics like grief, health, and mental wellness. The views expressed by guests are their own and may reflect individual experiences that are not meant as medical advice. As the host, I hold space for diverse voices, but that does not mean I endorse every viewpoint shared. Please listen with care and take what resonates with you. Today, I am chatting with Shari Ross. She is the author of Senior Living Made S.I.M.P.L.E, which we will find out which each of those letters mean in your book. And she is also the creator of a companion workbook and toolkit designed to help families take clear and practical steps through the senior living journey. And I am excited to get to know you and find out about your own journey, Shari. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Kendra. It's so lovely to be here.
Thank you for joining us. So, Shari, tell us about you and in that journey of how you, wherever it is you started, that you ended up now in this path in your life of senior living.
Yeah, very long and winding road to get here. I actually started out as a theater kid. And when I was in high school, I actually worked at a summer stock theater, kind of interned there, and I actually lived with my grandparents for those 2 summers that I worked at the theater. And most of the patrons at the theater were senior citizens. And I think that's where this all started for me, is I just had this really nice connection with these older adults for whatever reason. And I really enjoyed being around them. Cut to, you know, way past that, when I went to school at NYU, and I actually did continue in my theater and acting career into LA right after college, and did that for a while. Kind of put any senior citizen stuff on the background. Didn't think about it, but went through all of that, ended up then getting married and having 2 children. And when I went back to work, once they were a little bit older, I, kind of fell into doing pharmaceutical sales. And with that, I sold a medication named Namenda. Namenda is a medication that's used to treat Alzheimer's. And so that sort of opened my eyes a little bit initially to this world of memory loss and Alzheimer's and memory care. And, in speaking with all the nurses and doctors and people in that world, it just piqued my interest. And I then kind of started working at a memory care community and as in sales. And that really opened my eyes, because now I'm working with all the residents, right? And I'm working with the families of these residents and helping guide them through this crazy journey. And that's where really everything started for me. I went on to work for another community that had independent assisted living and memory care, and became a sales specialist all over the country after that. And so over the years, a period of 13, 14 years, I must have sat at the table, with hundreds and hundreds of families. and helped guide them through this maze of senior living and help them to navigate how it was going to work, like what to do, and answered all their questions. And I kept answering the kind of very similar questions and seeing a lot of the same reactions. A lot of families came to me just completely panicked and feeling guilty and feeling anxious and not knowing what to do and how to handle their mom or their dad or their spouse at this stage of life. And so I decided to write a book, and it's called Senior Living Made Simple. And it really puts all of the things that I had witnessed in terms of, not only the stories of things that I had seen and kind of funny day to day situations, but also a lot of the information that I had been giving to these families over the years. It is a book that is meant to be read prior to coming into this situation where you're having to, figure out senior living for a loved one. Because if you wait, and I do talk about this in the book, but if you wait too long, then you're scrambling. Then it creates chaos and confusion and anxiety. And we don't want that, right? So I think, if we can start early and, get this information under our belts and have just a solid base of knowledge of what's out there and how to deal with all of this, then we're all better off. So, we plan ahead for so many things in our lives, like weddings and travel and vacations and retirement, but we don't really talk about senior living. We avoid it. It's not, the most fun topic, and it could be morbid for some people to think about, that stage of life. But we are all going to get it, older, we all age.
Yes.
So we need to think about it.
It is so important to have these conversations, just like when we talk to people about even just their desires of even what they wish for their own death, too, and even our
Exactly.
own. Yet we, like you said, that word morbid, people think it's morbid to talk about these very natural and real processes that we are all going to go through. Like, aging is a process. And whether if we have the luxury of dying of old age and aging gracefully, fabulous, but also just the fact that the reality that we will at one point die, and having these conversations becomes so taboo because it's uncomfortable, right? To talk about things
Yeah.
that may bring discomfort to ourselves about our own reality if we're bringing it up to our loved ones. Like, hey, what would you like to, what would be your wishes and desires
Yeah.
as you get older? Do you want to live in an apartment on your own? Would you rather it be in care? And sometimes we are the ones that end up having to make that decision for them as children of aging parents. And especially, you said care memory, that you worked with a lot with medication that had to do with Alzheimer's. Then there's definitely at those points, it is all on you. There's not that conversation at that point if by chance your loved one is already in a state that they're not able to make that
Right.
decision. And that becomes even
Right.
harder, right?
Absolutely. So if we can kind of stave that off and help them to make their own decisions prior to them not being able to, then that's the best possible scenario. Unfortunately, that's just not always the case. And I have met with so many families who are in the midst of an emergency. They never really planned ahead, and they didn't realize, something could happen, such as mom fell, and she broke her hip, and now she's in the hospital, and then she's going to be in rehab for a few weeks. And then what? Can she go home? Is it safe? Probably not. Or now, you're noticing, or maybe you get a call from a neighbor, from somebody who's saying, oh yeah, I saw your dad, knocking on our neighbor's door in at 2 a.m., totally confused. And this has been happening for a few days. And oh my God. And so now it's your responsibility to suddenly like figure out a solution and it's all comes down to safety and dignity, making
Mm,
sure that your loved one is safe and feeling comfortable and is getting the right care. But that takes time sometimes to find and to figure out. So, like I said, starting early before those types of things happen is the key.
that is the key. Now, what, because you have simple S dot I dot, what does the simple acronym stand for in your
Yeah,
book?
so it's a framework. It's sort of there to kind of guide you through this whole process. And so each letter is a word. So S stands for support. And that means, we cannot do this solo. If you've got a loved one who needs care, you're not superwoman. You're not going to be able to handle everything on your own. And I work with a lot of people in the sandwich generation who've also got kids or teens or young adults themselves. They've got their careers and now they've got their aging parents. Well, it's impossible to do everything perfectly on your
I am
own.
that. I am the sandwich one. I'm
Me
in that
too.
generation.
Me too. And so it's just so difficult. So having, friends, family, support, professionals, whether that's a geriatric care manager or a social worker or a senior living placement advisor or whatever it is, having that support around you is so, so important and vital. So you don't get completely overwhelmed and then you're no good to anybody. And then I is for information. So again, that goes back to, having this kind of base of knowledge prior to all of this going on. So maybe once your parents turn, 65, start gathering information. I know that seems crazy and weird, but it helps. So if you have information about, what types of senior living is out there, what does it cost? What do I have to do to have a loved one go there? All of this information, having it just kind of, prepared at your fingertips is also really important. M is for matching. So when you're in the process of figuring out a potential senior living community for a loved one, you want to match their personality and their care needs to the specific community because they're all very different and your parent is very unique. So, for example, if your mom is sort of, the life of the party and loves being around people, great. Then you're wanting to look for a community that is a larger community, perhaps with more people and lots of activities and, things going on socially. But if, like, say your mom is, real kind of more of a loner, quiet type, then that wouldn't work for her. If there's like a mandatory fun hour every Tuesday night, that's not for her. That's not going to fit. So on top of that, what kind of care needs does your loved one have? Are they going to need full on, help with transfers from a chair or a bed into a wheelchair, or are they fairly independent? So matching is really important in terms of finding the right place for the right person. Okay, P. P is preparation. Preparation is getting everything in order ahead of time, not at 2 a.m. when you're in the hospital, trying to figure out, does my mom have long-term care insurance? Do they will they get a benefit from the Veterans Association? Do they have a 401k? Is that house, something that they want to use to sell to pay for senior living? So who's the power of attorney for health and finances? Where is all this paperwork? So prepping, way ahead of time is going to help alleviate so much anxiety and craziness when the day finally does come. So, like, for example, my mom and I took a full Saturday afternoon and sat down and we went through, she had met with, an attorney, and we went through this whole book that she had prepared with all of the information for her end of life wishes and everything that I would need to know so that I could be prepared. So prepping with your loved one, it's going to help you. It's, and them. So vital. And then where are we? L is letting go. And letting go is twofold. So letting go means letting go of the idea of guilt, letting go of the feeling that you're doing something that could be, wrong for your parents, because what that guilt is signaling is that you love them, and you don't know if you're, doing the right thing and, doing what they want, but you got to let go of that feeling because it doesn't serve anybody, right? So let go of that feeling of like, oh my God, I'm doing everything wrong. You're doing everything you can. That's all you can do. Letting go is also letting go of stuff. Because as you know, when you move to a senior living community, you can't bring, everything that you have, including your house. You got to let go of the things, because the most important thing is that community and connection and the care. So that 50-year-old antique table or the china set that your loved one has been holding on to, it's not going to serve them really when they do have care needs that are not doable in a house. So let go of the stuff, let go of feeling like you have to hold on to everything emotionally and physically. And then finally, we have E, engagement. Engagement is actually spending time with your loved one, but now in a different way. So you're not taking care of them. Once they go to a senior living community or they're getting the care that they need, now you can engage with them in a way that you're the daughter or you're the wife or the husband or the son, the way it really should be. So you can go and you can, play chess with them or take them out for lunch or, have a conversation about whatever, and engage with them in a fun, nice way that feels natural, instead of hopefully not, changing their incontinence supplies or helping them shower or, helping them eat or whatever it may be, which is really not our role. And so having professionals hopefully deal with the things that we are not meant to be doing, but and leaving that room for engaging with them, and just knowing that you can engage with them and then you can go on with your life and do what you need to do in your life. You're no longer their care manager or their caregiver in that sense. You're now their daughter, son, wife, husband. So that's
Wow.
engagement. Yeah.
As you're saying this, it's so interesting because I start getting like even anxiety of
Oh,
as you're saying it. Because one of the things too is how to even have this conversation when a parent that that is not in their scope of what they would wish, that they would do not, because who knows what ideas, because that's the thing too, it's like the idea of living in a senior facility or assisted living has sometimes culturally or society certain connotations, whether that it's that you're alone, that you don't have anybody that takes care of you, right? All these things that are associated with that. You're not wanted, you're not, whatever that could be associated with these that are not true, yet we make them sometimes part of our story of why we may not choose to want to have that either for ourselves as we age or even just for our parents, because they were like, well, if we say that, does that mean that I'm saying I don't want, not want to take care of them and love them,
yes.
right? So how do we start? And I know this is all in your book because that is why you made it. And I'm sure that this is one of those tough ones that you have to deal with families when you're talking. How do you get over that hump of being able to have that conversation and being able to release, like you said, the letting go of that guilt of of choosing this for your loved one if by chance they did not choose it for themselves?
Yeah, it is. It's probably the hardest part. So first of all, any conversation you have with your loved one about it isn't going to be one conversation. It's going to be multiple conversations, and even it could take months. It could, and sometimes we don't have that time. So, but if you do, it's sort of like you do a little pinprick. You just kind of lay the foundation by simply asking, right out, how do what are your end of life plans? What do you want to do if it's not safe to live in the home anymore? What do you want to do? How do you see yourself living, when you're 80 years old? Ask questions. We never want to say, you need to do this, you need to go here. Because really, the whole thing is about losing control and losing independence. That's why it's so scary to think about going into, leaving a house, leaving your home, and going into this place that, in most of our parents' eyes, they are thinking and imagining like this dark, dreary nursing home situation, which back in the day, that's kind of what it was. That's what they had. But today's, assisted living communities are vibrant, for the most part, vibrant and beautiful, and, lots and lots to do. And, so it's a whole different situation, but they don't know that. So that's okay. So we want to introduce, first of all, the idea of it in a way that's not scary. I always like to start with not using specific language, such as facility, nursing home, old age home, things like that, like home. Like, I don't know, there's just a connotation that comes along with, especially like facility or institution. So we want to use words like
It's
community
like
or
prison.
apartment.
Because you
Yeah,
say facility, I think of prison.
exactly. And everyone tends to use that word. And I always want to correct them because it's a scary word and it doesn't really equate to what's out there. So community, apartment, real simple thing, but it kind of makes a little difference. And you want to slowly but surely warm up your loved one by asking those simple questions, and then kind of with the preparation or information, we want to gather some information. So maybe you, as the daughter, son, goes and explores and looks at some communities in the area, gets, maybe you talk to some of the people that live there. Maybe you, just talk to people in your own community about what's out there. So you explore, maybe kind of find two top places that you think would fit your loved one. Then you say, hey, mom, dad, let's go out for lunch. Take them to the community. No pressure. This is not a tour. This is a visit. And there's no pressure and there's no specific like agenda, right? We're just going and having lunch at this place, open their eyes to what this might actually look like, right? Have them sit down and talk to some of the residents, and hopefully the residents have something positive to say. If not, that's not the place, right? But just get them, used to, okay, wow, this is actually not bad, right? Then you want to, kind of just slowly just keep bringing it up. Hopefully, they decide on their own that this is something they want, versus when something happens like a fall or, some sort of illness that, brings them to the hospital, that then you're getting complications and then you're just have to go to, a place. That could happen, and it does happen quite a bit. In fact, my father-in-law, I'm out here in California, he's in Florida. I noticed over a couple of years, that he was declining. He was very isolated. He was not eating well. He didn't seem very healthy. And so I brought up the idea of assisted living. He was like, oh, hell no, I'm not going. I am not leaving. No, 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 not happening. Totally opposed for like 2 years. That's why I'm saying, like, bring it up early, or as early as you possibly can, because it could take some time. Well, in the end, like I said, this happens all the time. He fell and he was found on the floor hours later, broken hip, went to the hospital, went to rehab, had no choice but to go to an assisted living. But he was feeling okay about it because I had talked to him many times about the idea of it. And he had sort of over time, even though he was saying he was opposed, it kind of got in his head and he was like, okay, I accept this. Well, fast forward, 2 months later of moving into this assisted living, completely different person, seemed like he was 10 years younger, eating 3 good nutritious meals a day, not microwaved, and socializing, playing cards, going to the store with the transportation the community offered because he no longer could drive. And he, I just actually saw him now. It's been about 3 years since he's been in the community, and he is thriving. And he's like just a prime example of why I advocate for community living as we age. It's not for everybody. I'm not saying that, but it is a really good choice for a lot of people, especially if you have become isolated. And and I think that being around people and being around community, but yet also having the privacy of your own apartment is such a wonderful thing as we age. And that's really what life's about. It's not about the things, it's not about the house, it's about, you know participating in life and in a community. And so anyway, that's why I'm a really big advocate. I've seen this happen more times than I could ever count, being around, all of these families and the communities that I worked in. The difference that I saw, not only in the residents' face and health and seemingly, their happiness, but also the families, because now, the families are like, oh, my, mom, my dad, they're actually doing pretty well. And it alleviates over time. Their guilt does alleviate. That initial guilt is normal. It's going to happen, but it does tend to dissipate. And I do see differences in the faces of family members oftentimes, after their loved one has settled in.
Hi, I just wanted to take a quick pause and ask that if this episode is speaking to you, I'd love for you to subscribe to my newsletter. Just go to my website, Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between, and you will be receiving some of my newsletters I send every probably couple of weeks. Also, if someone has popped into your mind and you feel that this is something they would resonate with, please send them this episode right now because it may just be what they needed to hear. Now, let's get back to the show.
In my book, I talk about the whole process of the move and, the day to day after the move happens and the weeks after, and how long it takes to kind of really settle in and what those stages look like. I'm not going to say that this is all, wonderful, fairy, lovely,
No,
everything's
it's
perfect.
it's a
But
huge transition. I was just even thinking of just the grief itself because
mhm,
relocating, even just moving to another home
it's
brings a
hard.
lot of grief. So,
Yes.
and especially, I was just even like jotting down here, even asking you when you're not able to bring some of the things that even ground you and make it be your home, like we were saying, let's say that antique table that represents like your family heritage and it's been in your home forever, and then you move somewhere and there's things there that you're not able to even bring that kind of ground you. There is
There's
grief
grief.
in that. You're letting go of things that you identify as home and
Right.
not bringing them with you.
And
So
that's why the
that it
transition is difficult, initially, but what I
yes,
find is that even though they're losing some things, they're gaining so many other things,
yes,
and so many people think they're losing independence when, in fact, they actually gain independence. They are able to, everything's now at your fingertips. You're able to do so much more without so much help from, like, say, your daughter or your son. So you gain companionship, you gain community, you you gain a different sense of life altogether. But yes, you do need to grieve the things that you are losing. That is
mhm,
a complete reality. There is a time period where there is a huge adjustment, and I'm not going to lie, it's not easy, but in the end, over time, it does get so much easier and things actually do get a lot better.
yeah,
But you got to get
and there's
through
a
that period.
yeah, there's a duality in emotions too. Just because you're grieving what you've left, you could still be enjoying what you've gained too in this space. It's not and or, you can still even somebody's that might have been still living there years down the line and enjoying their community and enjoying their freedom. Like you said, there's still parts of their life that they're going to grieve. And that is normal. That is
Mhm.
okay. There's nothing wrong with grieving the life you had,
No.
yet being grateful for the life you now have as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like you said, all these other things that you've gained, the relationships that you're building because the people that you're around are all in the same space. So you have this community of people that gets you because you're living in a space around other like-minded people. When in one of the tools that I talk about, like in grief, like when somebody, let's say, has had a death in their family, is finding other people that you can relate to. And in this case, you're relating to others that have made just the same step as you have. And some have been there for more years. So they're able to kind of guide you and give you hope as to what it would look like if you are the one that's moving to this new home, right? And
Yeah.
then you can then be that mentor for somebody else then as they come into the space as well. So
Yeah.
it's constantly evolving those roles of you accompanying somebody else as they're, it's like
Yeah, and
settling
that
in
gives
somebody else
you
as they're there.
absolutely, and that gives you also a sense of purpose, right?
Yes.
You have a reason to get up in the morning when you, one, have things to do, and you know that there's activities around you that you can participate in, but also that you're guiding other people that have maybe in the past guided you, the same way. So you feel like there is something to do, and I really believe that is one of the most important things as we age, is finding that sense of purpose and
Oh, it's
not letting
so
it
important.
go.
I was watching those shows of like the blue zones, like the people
Mhm.
that live for long. And really, one of the things that does help us live longer is having a sense of purpose and having a sense of community. And so, there, like you said, even just with your own father in law, that you've seen him age backwards just since he's been there. And it's probably because he's gained those two things, community and purpose. And especially,
Yes.
you don't live in the same state. I don't live in the same state as my dad, who's now remarried. My dad's a widow and now remarried. So that part of him not having even us living nearby, right, doesn't have that part. And then there's the part of then community as well. Thank goodness he has someone, he has his wife, but that part of, yeah, it's just so important in your well-being to have those two things. So this is something that we are adding to our lives by being in these kind of spaces. So that is
Correct.
huge. Thank you, Sherry, for that. So, Sherry, as I was like then saying, what are some of these things that people do end up bringing along with them that you've noticed that and like that they put in their room that ends up grounding their space to make it feel like home?
Yeah.
What do you feel? And I know it's in your book, but with that you could just give our listeners
Yeah.
like a little tidbit of some of the things you do bring along.
Absolutely. So I think that one of the top number one things would be photos and pictures. So things that you can hang on your wall, old photos of family or whatever has happened in your life. And it's always so interesting when other people come into the room, to kind of look around, look and see all these photos and get an idea, a sense of, who this person was as a youngster. So, having all that up there is wonderful. And then just having, maybe you have a special blanket or a special chair that, you usually sit in to read or to watch TV or whatever it is. So maybe one real important piece of furniture that you love that can fit in the room. And, just maybe even just articles of clothing that you really, really love. These are things that you can always bring, right? But I do think that the artwork, the photos, things you can display, that's the best possible thing that you could bring and make you feel like you're at home. I think, again, reconnecting yourself to family in the sense of, being able to see their faces every day in a photo is always going to, help and make you feel like you are grounded.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you even move to, you lived in New York, now live in California. You're an
Mhm.
East Coast girl now living in the West Coast, and right, is that correct? You're
Yes, that
originally
is
from
that
this,
is
yeah.
right. Yeah.
So you are. I've moved a lot. I'm from Colombia. I've lived in the States. I've moved, and I do have like buckets full of all like my pictures. It's funny though because they're Tupperware, whatever those containers, yet there some of them are not even displayed, but just even the having them as I've moved throughout the last 30 years of my life around the
Yeah.
States and, coming to another country, feel like I'm bringing a part of me. And so the same thing
Yes.
with here, there's like you're bringing something along that has been
Yeah.
part of your journey.
I always think like, okay, if there was a fire, which unfortunately living in California, I've had to
Yep. Live through.
kind of
Yes.
get through a few times and had to run out the door at the last second. And I had to figure out, what is it that I want to bring? What can I get before I leave? Because who knows what's going to be here when I get back. Thankfully, I haven't had any damage or my house is still standing and it's
Mhm.
fine. But a lot of other people aren't as fortunate. And anyway, so having to figure that out on the flight, the thing that I have collected every single time, well, the two times that I've had to leave quickly, is my photo albums and I have a bucket, like you said, a Tupperware thing
Mhm.
of photos, and that's what I took, and my animals,
Documents.
of course,
Yeah, and
and
our
some,
documents and our
yeah,
documents sometimes
our
too. Yeah, yeah.
documents. But
Mhm.
yeah, but like, and I didn't even really think for a second about taking things, any
Mhm.
things, any yeah, I probably grabbed a couple of valuables, but that's it. Like, and I didn't think twice. I mean, I had to have the photos. I had to have those documents, obviously. So that to me tells me like what is really important, and it transfers over to when our loved ones do move. Same thing if our kids are going to college, they're going to have to probably get new furniture and new things, and but taking along some of those mementos, those treasures of photos and things like that, that's what I think will make you feel grounded, whether you're a college student or whether you're a senior citizen. Same thing.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sherry, when you were talking earlier about your own story of having been a theater kid, which by the way, that I majored in theater myself too. So it's like we got that.
Oh,
And here I
yeah.
am doing something different.
I
You
know,
are
it's so
also doing
weird, right?
something different. Yes.
Totally
Ooh,
different.
and the I want to talk about the element of identity because we ourselves are even living a different identity than we even thought we were going to have in terms of what it is
Totally.
we do, right? What we do is different. The identity aspect in the caretaker role, the child role, the spouse role, and that part I think is huge. And you said that earlier that when you are able to to really just be the child and not be the caretaker, can you talk of, maybe you have some stories of how the dynamics of the family can be can benefit from these type of situations because of that
Yeah.
identity kind of being still what it was, that it's the child still remains being the child.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I kind of go back to when I've seen families try to, take care of their loved one in their home, right, on their own without a caregiver. Just you're the caregiver in their home, or they're in your home. The stress that I see from both parties is enormous. There is no room for the interactions that you would have as a child, adult child. The fun goes out the door. It's not fun, and it's stressful, and it creates this sense of like, just, I don't know what the word would be, despair. There's always like guilt, and I'm not doing enough, and how do I do this properly? And there's just not enough time. There's not enough time for sleep. There's not, and when you don't sleep and you don't rest, then that affects everything else. So, that's why when you can separate that and have your loved one being cared for by professionals, where you can go visit and you can spend time with your loved one as the adult child, that forges a much nicer, closer relationship where you can actually just be their son, daughter, or wife or husband, and not have to worry about those things that, as their child, you shouldn't necessarily have to be doing, right? So that's why, again, I advocate for, one, not taking care of loved one yourself in a home. I know that sometimes that is impossible to not. Maybe there's a financial issue, because obviously we know that senior living in all forms is can be expensive. But, you know, in the end, if we can figure out a way to make it happen where your loved one is getting the care they need outside the home and outside of your own self, then that's ideal. And I think in the end, it just creates so much less stress, and creates a feeling of getting back to the family dynamics, which is the natural order of things, in the end. And I'm not saying that you don't need to, even if a loved one is in a senior living community, let's say, there's always still responsibilities. You got to advocate for your loved one. You got to make sure that they're getting what they need, and observing, and making sure that they have the things that they
Mhm.
specifically need, that maybe the community can't really do for them. But it's way lesser load than actually doing the care yourself. That is something that you can now, be relieved of, and then you can just do the little things, the little errands, a little whatever, but you can spend time with your loved one in a much, much less stressful way.
As you're saying this, I'm thinking, you mentioned your father-in-law lives in Florida. You guys live in California. When we're having to try to make the decision as to the where, because
Mm.
then if you're moving out of your home, do you suggest, or do most people end up moving? Let's say if you don't live near your children, and or your parents don't live near you, or if you're the one listening to this as you're aging and you don't live near your children, and you're trying to figure out, where would I want to go? Do I want to be still in the same city or state that I'm already living, even if my children are away? Or like, how do you make that decision, or of the
Yeah.
where?
Yeah, and I really think it depends on a couple things. So, I mean, because I've had so many families where they've moved their loved one, from across the country to a community that's real close to them, because they really love to, they have a close relationship, let's say, and really want to like be able to see them on a regular basis at the community. Or maybe their loved one has, some severe care needs, or they have dementia, and they do need to have a loved one close by to tend to some of the things that they're going to need. Even with them getting care at the community, there's still things to take care of. So that would be a reason why you'd want to have your loved one, move. I have also had family members move out to their loved one where they live. And, but that's less plausible because typically the adult child has other responsibilities near their own home. They can't just pick up and, move their kids to another school or change their jobs all of a sudden. So typically, you're either going to have your loved one move towards you, or if nobody can move, then unfortunately you're going to have to make the trek back and forth. But what the good thing is, today, in today's world, we have technology, and that does alleviate some of this when you do live across the country from your loved one, totally out of, just not near them. Whether that means, FaceTime, or, you have cameras now, you have Alexa devices, you have ways to communicate with your loved one in a much easier way than we used to. So as long as the community can help with that, because as some older people do not understand technology, understandably. So as long as they've got, the help to get all these things going and set up, then that's another really nice way to be able to still have a presence in your loved ones' lives, even if they're across the country from you.
Yeah, my goodness. Yeah, it makes such a big difference. Even just me thinking of when I moved to the States and my parents were in Colombia, and that I don't know how often I would even talk on the phone with them. It was mainly through letters and waiting for a letter to get here. And
Oh
like
my God.
now, as I'm thinking of when my kids are going to go to well, one's already in college, but he's commuting, so he's still at home. It's just different, right? And now I can even see where they are in these like apps of like, oh, they're Life 360. Oh, they're
Yeah.
this. It's
Yeah,
like,
I
oh,
know. It's
so
amazing.
different.
It's so cool. And then even like if you're concerned about, are they taking their medications? There's medication like pill boxes that
Apps
are like technologically,
like a hotel
advanced. And
room. Yeah, like a
yeah,
hotel room that if you pick up a snack, they automatically charge it to your thing. It's probably like a
yes,
pill box that when it's been taken out. They've
exactly.
taken it. That's so
Yeah, you can
techy. My
monitor all
goodness.
that. I know. Even, I mean, you can say you have a parent with diabetes and they've got, diabetes type 2, and they have to, take insulin, and you can have a little monitor. I've seen this with a lot of families where they have a little monitor themselves where it tells you if their blood sugar is too high or too low. So then you can call the community and say, hey, my mom or dad is, dealing with this. So there's a lot of technology out there that really really helps to alleviate some of that stress that goes along with being across, not
Away.
near your parent. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's so helpful to have all these resources that we have.
Yeah.
Sherry, as we wrap up, I always like to ask before we go into how people can get in touch with you and get your book and stuff, is there something I have not asked you that you want to make sure to share with the audience?
We've touched on this, but I just want to make it just super clear in that, we will wait to deal with this until the last second because it's not a pleasant topic. But I promise you, if you act early and prep and prepare and get this information, ahead of time, before having to just do it on the whim and then make bad decisions, hopefully not, but it happens, then this will make it so much easier for you in the long run. So sit down with your loved one, go through their paperwork, make sure that's in order, reach out to local community, referral agents, find out what's in the community in terms of where your parent could go in a couple different scenarios, whether it's memory care or assisted living, or what else is out there. Is there a 6-bed, like a boarding care home, and what kind of skilled nursing facilities are there? Find all this stuff out ahead of time. Get it off your plate, so then when and if things happen quickly, which unfortunately they do a lot of times, then you're ready to go, hopefully. And just keep on talking to your loved one about what their wishes are. Just ask questions and do it in a way that's coming from love, and just showing them that you care. Not Don't make it scary. Don't make it like you have to do this. Let them retain their independence and their control over it. Let them feel like they are making the decision. But that is done by slowly introducing the idea of, let's think about what's to be when you age. And
That's
I think
perfect.
that's my biggest message to everyone.
Thank you, Shari. Thank you so much. And now, Shari, how do people get in touch with you and get the book?
Yeah. So my website is the same as my book title, seniorlivingmadesimple.com. In the webpage, or on the website, you can actually order my books there. You can also sign up for some senior living coaching, in case you just need a hand to get through the process, just to have a friendly ear to talk to, a hand to hold, and then to get a bunch of resources that you may need. So you can sign up for different length sessions with me. Or you can go to Amazon.com, Walmart.com, BarnesandNobles.com, anywhere online books are sold, and you can order my books there.
Perfect. Thank you
Yeah.
again, Shari. Again, this was Shari Ross with Senior Living Made Simple. And we are so grateful again to have you here and for opening up our eyes into this world in which so many of us, either ourselves will have to do or we'll have to navigate through with our parents. So thank you.
Thank you, Kendra. It was lovely to be here with you today.
Thank you. Thank you again so much for choosing to listen today. I hope that you can take away a few nuggets from today's episode that can bring you comfort in your times of grief. If so, it would mean so much to me if you would rate and comment on this episode. And if you feel inspired in some way to share it with someone who may need to hear this, please do so. Also, if you or someone you know has a story of grief and gratitude that should be shared so that others can be inspired as well, please reach out to me. And thanks once again for tuning in to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. Have a beautiful day.